So there are three things I want to cover in this podcast. The first is kind of interesting. It's the reaction to the previous podcast. So many people take objection to the G word. Kind of amusing, really. Seems I'm not going to please the religious bigots and I'm not going to please the atheist bigots. I don't care. People believe and do whatever they want. But it will not stop me using the G word. It's a convenient word to describe all there is. So, yeah, that reaction was interesting. I imagine I attract some people who might describe themselves as atheists or maybe even nihilists, although I've never understood the word nihilist. There's something's going on, we experience stuff, so it's not exactly as though there's nothing, is it? Anyway, so that's the first thing. I'm going to be pleasing neither the atheist nor the religious bigot. The second thing is all change, as you can see on the slide there. Now, Corporal Fantasy will stay pretty much the same as it is. I'll be throwing something up there every week or two, which is the way it seems to be happening. It's for general discussion and covering everything from physics through to Schopenhauer. And maybe other topics as well. And then a new thing, philosophy workshop, which already has a website. I'll put the link down below. Philosophy workshop is basically, as the name suggests, for people who are interested in more than just a little bit of entertainment, which is really what Corporal Fantasy is. Although, I'm probably not doing justice to some people because I do get messages from people saying that the discussions on Corporal Fantasy help them and they find it useful. So it's not just entertainment. So that's very gratifying. But Philosophy Workshop is going to be more about detailed analysis, and there'll be a lot of Spinoza on there. As you can see, in terms of the volume of detailed analysis, there'll be 20% of what I'm producing. I intend to produce an awful lot of detailed analysis around Spinoza. Almost every sentence in Spinoza is loaded. You could speak for an hour on any particular statement he makes. And that's why people find it so hard to understand and why it has a reputation for being the hardest thing to understand, particularly his ethics, the hardest thing in philosophy to understand. And as he says, if it was easy, everybody would do it. Because it's not easy, hardly anybody does it. And I'm going to get on to doing what precisely in a moment, because at the end of the day, we need to know why we're doing all this stuff. I mean, there's clearly an appetite to understand, but why? What is it that we're after? I'll get to that in a moment. And so, after a number of people have suggested it, I've finally had a look at Patreon. I've still no idea how the details work. It just seems unbelievably complicated to me. So that's going to take a week or two to get going. But in a month or so, I imagine I'll start piling content on there. And it'll be all the detailed analysis, initially of Spinoza, although I intend to go into Schopenhauer and Kant, and probably some other things, maybe Lao Tzu as well. Anyway, detailed analysis. Because until you get down to the detail, really, it's just not stuff you can use particularly. You have to have a thorough understanding of the way life is. You have to understand all the details, otherwise you have no power. And power is a very important word. Again, I'll get onto that in a moment. But also in Patreon, I shall be detailing practices. And there's a good reason why you do practice, and again, I'll get onto that in a moment. And finally, some kind of workshops. I used to run a Spinoza group via Skype last year. It was fairly successful. I think about 14 or 15 people participated. I stopped it in the end because I could see in reality it wasn't going anywhere. It was basically me blathering about Spinoza for an hour and then the next week blathering for another hour. I don't think people are learning all that much. The way you learn is through doing stuff. In fact, understanding comes from experience. Knowledge, on the other hand, which is just stuff you store into your, or you push into your head, is just because you read something or heard something. There's no experience involved in it. Anyway, so that's the structure of it. Corporeal Fantasy, still keep going, general discussion. Philosophy workshop. If you want some detailed analysis, then go to that website. Again, I'll put the link below. And then Patreon, when I get Patreon going, I will put some kind of a link. I presume there's some kind of a link you can put to it for people who want to go and do detailed stuff. And obviously, because it's on Patreon, it's not all going to be free. And if you think it should all be free, then, you know, just don't go there. Take the free stuff. So let me get on to the meat of this particular podcast. There's, well, I found in the Gurdjieff work that there was a lot of practice, a lot of stuff that people are told to do, and never why you should do it. Yeah, there were kind of vague statements like, well, to create a soul, an immortal soul. Well, I never believed that. Do I have an immortal soul? I've got no idea. Probably not. Or to build an astral body. Well, you know, I just don't buy all that stuff. The only thing I was really interested in was freedom. So let me tell you, and you can see it from the slide. The only reason that we do all this stuff is to get to a situation where we are free, inwardly free. Now, we never become totally inwardly free in this life. Spinoza says, while you have a body, you will have passions, passive emotions, he calls them, reactions to things. But you can have less, you can become more free. So, let's go through the various steps. First of all, you need to understand things. It's only when you understand things that you will then move on to practice. If you don't understand why you're doing something, then eventually you'll just lose interest. There's a famous statement by Epictetus, and he said, reason will not be fooled. And it's true. If your reasoning cannot understand something, or believes that something is a load of baloney, then eventually you will not do what is being suggested that you should do as a practice, because you see no real reason to do it. And understanding takes a long time to acquire. All of this is long-term stuff. You know, there's no sort of weekend retreat hit in all of this. Understanding takes years, but of course it can be accelerated by relevant information and people explaining stuff, which is what I hope to do on Philosophy Workshop and Patreon. So, understanding, number one. Number two is you need to practice. So, for example, you need to practice self-observation. Why? Because you need to establish a little bit of distance between what is happening within you and some kind of observer within yourself. If you don't have that distance, you're going to be totally consumed by what's happening. So when something good or nice happens, you're going to be all excited and happy, you know, like a dog with a bone. And if something bad happens, you lose your job or whatever, then you're going to be in the depths of depression or, you know, very unhappy, like a dog that's just had a kick up the arse, you know, it goes skulking in a corner. There's a very famous statement by Gurdjieff. The aim of his work was not to die like a dog. And unless you practice and build some kind of muscles, then you will live and die like a dog. Excited 1 minute, unhappy the next minute. Just going through those cycles over and over and over again. There's no freedom there. So, first step is understand why you're doing stuff. Second step is to practice various things. And these things are not complicated, but they are difficult. They're simple. They fall into that category of being simple but difficult. And again, years of practice required. So for example, in observation, one of the things you should do, or one of the skills you should acquire, is that of just being able to observe without any judgment. You know, it sounds easy. It's not easy. It takes years to get to a position where you can see within yourself, oh yeah, I really hate that guy over there, and not judge, you know, oh, I shouldn't hate people, or, you know, in some kind of denial because your superego is filtering the whole thing out. So understanding practice. This leads to power. Now, if you read Spinoza and the Ethics, he's always talking about power. And in fact, for Spinoza, power and virtue are the same thing. In fact, he actually says that in part 4 of his Ethics. If you want to understand virtue, then all you need to understand is power. The power what? The power to do what? The power not to be taken by events and by your passive emotions, your responses to things. And where does all of this lead? It leads to freedom, or at least to more freedom. And there's nothing like freedom, the sweetest thing that a human being can experience. Spinoza called it blessedness. Another word for it might be contentment, because of course if you are content, you are not disturbed, you don't have desires, you're not you know, in the depths of depression 1 minute and on a high the next minute. So freedom from passive emotions, from passive responses to things. And that is a long-term work, and it's the most prized of all things, in my opinion anyway. So there we go, shorter than usual, but you know, it's clear to me that there's an appetite for greater detail, and in fact there are several people working with, a couple of people I know, and they haven't appeared 1 week and disappeared the next. They're still there after a number of months, so clearly they're getting something. So anyway, that's the shape of things to come. When I get Patreon established, then I will broadcast it. And there's a link to Philosophy Workshop below. And oh, the final thing, almost forgot. There's a Philosophy Workshop YouTube channel. I've just created it. There's nothing on there apart from an intro video. But go and sign up for it, because a lot of the material will be going on there. You know, maybe, I don't know, maybe twice as much as gets onto Corporal Fantasy. And if you want more detailed stuff, then that's the place you should go. So go and subscribe to that, and yeah, you'll get notifications of detailed analysis that goes on that particular channel.